What happens when two powerful nations remain locked in long-term strategic tension? What if the situation does not explode into open conflict, but also never fully cools down? And how could that ongoing pressure quietly reshape global energy markets, diplomacy, and everyday economic life? Host Introduction. Hi, welcome to Global Strategy Brief. Today we are breaking down a critical geopolitical question. What happens if tension between the United States and Iran continues? Not in a dramatic or sensational way, but in a steady, prolonged, strategic way. We will examine the background, the current situation, the strategic motivations on both sides, the global economic impact, and the possible future scenarios, all in a neutral, educational format. Let's begin. Background context. To understand where things might go, we first need to understand how we got here. The relationship between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran has been complex for decades. After the 1979 Iranian Revolution, diplomatic ties between the two countries changed dramatically. Political alignment shifted, trust declined, communication channels narrowed. Over time, several key issues defined the relationship. Iran's regional influence across the Middle East, partnerships with regional allies, sanctions and economic pressure, concerns surrounding nuclear development, maritime security in the Persian Gulf. In 2015, a major diplomatic agreement known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, often called the JCPOA, was signed between Iran and world powers, including the United States. The agreement aimed to limit Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for sanction relief. However, in 2018, the United States withdrew from the agreement and reinstated economic sanctions. Iran gradually reduced compliance with certain provisions. Since then, the relationship has moved through cycles of economic pressure, diplomatic outreach, strategic signaling, limited regional incidents, temporary de-escalation efforts. It has not been a straight path toward confrontation, but it has also not returned to stable diplomatic normalization. Instead, it has entered what many analysts describe as a managed tension phase. And that brings us to today. Current situation explanation. Right now, U.S.-Iran tension exists on multiple levels. Pirmez economic pressure. The United States maintains various sanctions targeting sectors of Iran's economy, particularly energy exports and financial transactions. Sanctions are designed as strategic leverage. Iran, in response, seeks alternative trade partners and regional economic cooperation mechanisms. This economic dimension remains one of the most significant pressure points. 2. Regional influence. Iran holds influence through political partnerships and aligned groups across parts of the Middle East. The United States maintains military presence and security partnerships in the region. Both sides monitor each other's movements carefully, but large-scale direct confrontation has been avoided. Tracery diplomatic channels. At times, indirect diplomatic discussions occur through mediators. At other times, negotiations stall. The tone shifts depending on political leadership, global events, and regional developments. Currently, diplomacy appears cautious and limited. 4. Maritime security. The Strait of Hormuz remains strategically critical. Roughly one-fifth of global oil supply passes through this narrow waterway. Any instability there immediately affects global energy prices. So far, shipping continues, but markets remain sensitive. Strategic analysis. Now, let's move beyond events and into strategy. Why would tension continue instead of resolving quickly? Because both sides calculate costs and benefits carefully. The U.S. strategic perspective. From Washington's point of view, several priorities stand out. Preventing nuclear proliferation, maintaining regional stability, protecting allied interests, ensuring energy flow stability, maintaining diplomatic leverage. The U.S. approach often combines economic sanctions with diplomatic offers. This creates pressure but leaves room for negotiation. It is a dual-track strategy, but it carries risks. Long-term sanctions can reduce immediate leverage over time if the target adapts economically. The Iranian strategic perspective. From Tehran's point of view, key priorities include preserving sovereignty, reducing economic vulnerability, expanding regional diplomatic ties, increasing strategic bargaining power. Iran may view sustained resilience as a strategic win. If it withstands economic pressure while maintaining regional influence, it strengthens its negotiating position. But economic strain also affects domestic stability and long-term growth. So Iran balances resistance with selective diplomacy. What if tension continues? Now we reach the central question. What happens if this strategic tension continues for years? Not full-scale escalation, not full reconciliation, but persistent pressure. Let's explore the major areas of impact. Global energy market impact. Energy markets respond immediately to geopolitical uncertainty. Even without open conflict, prolonged tension creates a risk premium. That means oil prices may trade slightly higher due to uncertainty. If shipping lanes remain open, the effect is moderate. But if insurance costs for shipping increase, prices can rise. For U.S. consumers, this may mean higher gasoline prices, increased transportation costs, subtle inflation pressure. For global markets, it may mean increased investment in alternative energy, diversification away from single-region dependence, acceleration of renewable energy strategies. Ironically, long-term tension can speed up global energy transitions. Economic impact beyond energy. Sustained tension influences more than oil. It affects international banking systems, currency stability, regional investment confidence, trade corridors. Investors prefer predictability. Uncertainty reduces risk appetite. If tension remains manageable, markets adjust. If unpredictability increases, capital flows shift towards safer assets. This can strengthen the US dollar, but it can also increase global financial volatility. International diplomacy. Prolonged tension reshapes diplomatic alliances. Other major powers monitor the situation closely. Countries such as Russia, China, European Union members, Gulf Cooperation Council states, all calculate their own strategic interests. Some may seek mediation roles. Others may expand economic cooperation with Iran. Some may align more closely with U.S. security frameworks. Diplomacy becomes more layered. Instead of a simple two-country issue, it becomes a multi-power balancing act. Regional stability. The Middle East remains strategically sensitive. Persistent tension can create heightened alert levels, increased defense spending, slower regional economic integration, greater reliance on security partnerships. But it can also push regional actors toward dialogue. Sometimes sustained tension creates incentives for neighboring countries to pursue de-escalation initiatives. Civilian life impact. It's important to remember something. Geopolitical tension affects ordinary people more than headlines show. In Iran, sanctions influence inflation. Import restrictions affect consumer goods. Currency pressure impacts savings. In the United States, energy prices affect household budgets. Defense spending affects fiscal priorities. Diplomatic tensions influence public discourse. Across the region, businesses delay investment. Tourism fluctuates. Youth employment opportunities shift. These impacts are gradual, but they are real. Future scenario analysis. Let's explore 3 realistic pathways. Scenario 1, managed tension continues. In this scenario, sanctions remain limited. Diplomatic talks continue. No major escalation occurs. Energy flows remain stable. This is the most likely short-term outcome. Both sides maintain pressure but avoid crossing red lines. Global markets adapt. Volatility remains moderate. Scenario 2, diplomatic breakthrough. Here, negotiations resume formally. Sanctions relief is phased. Nuclear oversight agreements are strengthened. Regional confidence improves. Oil prices may stabilize. Investment confidence rises. Diplomatic channels widen. But this requires political willingness on both sides. Scenario 3, strategic escalation without full conflict. In this scenario, regional incidents increase. Sanctions intensify. Cyber or economic responses expand. Energy markets react sharply. Even without direct large-scale confrontation, risk perception rises. Markets become volatile. Diplomatic polarization increases. This scenario is less stable, but still manageable if communication lines remain open. The bigger strategic question. Here's something to think about. Is prolonged tension sometimes strategically intentional? Some analysts argue that controlled tension can serve as leverage. It keeps negotiation channels relevant. It maintains strategic deterrence. It reinforces alliances. But it also carries long-term fatigue risks. Over time, economic pressure strategies may lose effectiveness. Over time, public opinion shifts. Over time, global energy diversification reduces leverage. So, the strategic balance is dynamic. Questions for viewers. Let me ask you something. Do you believe long-term economic pressure changes behavior? Or does it encourage strategic resistance? Do you think diplomacy is more effective during high tension or during periods of calm? These are not simple questions, and global policymakers wrestle with them constantly. How this affects the United States. For U.S. policymakers, the challenge is balancing security commitments, energy stability, inflation concerns, global alliance credibility. American voters often focus on domestic economic conditions, so foreign policy decisions intersect with fuel prices and inflation perceptions. This creates political pressure cycles. How this affects Iran. For Iran, the challenge is balancing economic resilience, domestic stability, regional influence, diplomatic flexibility. The longer sanctions remain, the more structural adjustments Iran must make. But the more adjustments it makes, the less leverage sanctions may hold. Long-term global strategic shifts. Persistent tension may accelerate. Alternative payment systems outside traditional Western banking. Regional trade blocs. Energy diversification away from Gulf dependency. Defense cooperation agreements. Global power dynamics slowly evolve. Not overnight, but steadily. Conclusion. So what happens if tension between the United States and Iran continues? Most likely we see managed pressure, strategic signaling, energy market sensitivity, diplomatic maneuvering, gradual global adjustment, not necessarily dramatic escalation, not necessarily immediate resolution, but a prolonged strategic balancing act. Understanding this helps us move beyond headlines. It reminds us that global strategy is rarely black and white. It is layered, it is calculated, and it is constantly evolving. Thank you for watching Global Strategy Brief. Stay informed, stay analytical, and we'll see you in the next breakdown.